Welcome to the seventh part of the Money series. Let's talk about Bretton Woods Agreement. Listen well because this is an important development that contributed to inflation, dollar supremacy, and the subsequent need to create the very first cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. In this episode, we will discuss the Bretton Woods Agreement and how it put the US in a position of power. As World War II was coming to an end, the leading Western powers led by the US met to develop the Bretton Woods Agreement. In 1944, more than 700 representatives from 44 nations traveled to the Mount Washington Hotel, a secluded resort in the mountains of Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The intention was to come up with a new financial system for the global economy. With the global economy in recovery, they needed to regulate and promote international trade. The first thing they needed to decide was on currency pegs. Currency pegs are expected to provide currency stabilization for trade of goods and services as well as financing. Since the US held most of the world's gold supply and the gold-backed dollar was relatively stable, US became the world's reserve currency. This meant other currencies could back their currencies with dollars rather than gold. In order to ensure compliance with the new rules, two international institutions were created. The International Monetary Fund, which is known as the IMF, to monitor exchange rates and identify nations that needed global monetary support, and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, now known as the World Bank, to manage funds meant to help countries hit by World War II. This rule afforded the US dollar some privileges that other countries could only dream of. The biggest benefit to the US is the circulation that we enjoy. The world bought more and more of the dollar, but this is a double-edged sword. While being the world's reserve currency means there is constant demand for the dollar, it also means two things. It's easier for us to print more money even when we don't have the domestic product to match it, and it's easier to abuse the privilege. We will discuss this in greater detail later. So by 1971, concerned that the US gold supply was no longer adequate to cover the number of dollars in circulations, President Richard M. Nixon devalued the US dollar relative to gold. After a run on gold reserves, he declared a temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. By 1973, the Bretton Woods system had collapsed. Countries were then free to choose any exchange arrangement for their currency except pegging its value to the gold. So they could, for example, link its value to another country's currency or a basket of currencies, or simply let it float freely and allow market forces to determine its value relative to other countries' currencies. And this is when everything went south. We had a currency we can print to our heart's content that the world wants, and no asset to back it up. In the next episode, let's discuss how much the US dollar we have out there, and then get into inflation.